I applaud the spirit of fighting when the fight is fair, right? But in Venezuela, it wasn't a fair fight. My brother had gotten so much conviction around Bitcoin that he gave my dad pretty much like an ultimatum. And he was like, you either fund this or I'm leaving the house. In a matter of 2 hours, he has to pack his life into a car with his wife and 2 kids and transit the most dangerous stretch of road. And my family from that point on fled, but my family never went back. While I will always say that finding Bitcoin and hyperinflation is a blessing, and I love the life that I live today, it's incredibly painful to have to separate your family.
That story alone explains why you've been so passionate about Bitcoin, right? Because it matters not as a business opportunity, it matters at a personal level as a way to give not just financial freedom, but freedom to people that didn't exist.
The way we were able to opt out, I knew everyone would want the same.
Hi everyone, sorry to interrupt, but this is the cheesy podcast bit that gets on everyone's nerves, but it's really important to me. Please, if you can like the channel and also subscribe, it helps me a lot to get the best guests in the world for you guys. So click like and subscribe. Appreciate it. Thanks. Hi, I'm Raoul Pal, and welcome to my show, The Journeyman, where I travel to that nexus of understanding between macro, crypto, and the exponential age of technology. Now, Bitcoin is something I got into back in 2013. I realized back at that time that it solved a big bunch of problems. Nobody in the financial system owns anything. We saw that in the European sovereign crisis and the banking crisis in 2012 and the US and global financial crisis in 2008. You see, nobody in an over-indebted system owns the collateral because it's being reused and reused. Even your money in your bank account isn't safe. Now, we're lucky where we live, many of us. Many of us live in the West where there are some elements of security within the banking system. It's not entirely there. We get bank runs, we get problems. But when your entire system is rigged against you, where your money doesn't get debased by 8% a year, but you get 1,000,000% inflation. Well, that's a whole different story. When the government is actually seizing your assets, then suddenly Bitcoin becomes incredibly important. And I think these stories need to be told. These stories are some of the most important stories in the world because not everybody has a secure nation state. In fact, most countries are not so secure. So I wanted to bring one of those stories to life to show how the system can collapse around you and how you can avoid it. And also how that led to innovation in Bitcoin lending to enable different people access to this incredible pristine collateral. Anyway, let's chat to Mauricio from Ledn. I think you're going to love this. It's fascinating. It's inspiring, it's also concerning, but I think you'll learn a lot. Join me, Raoul Pal, as I go on a journey of discovery through the macro, crypto, and exponential age landscapes. In The Journeyman, I talk to the smartest people in the world so we can all become smarter together. Mauricio, great to have you on Real Vision.
It's one of my bucket lists. So now I've done the triple crown of Bitcoin content. This is one of the ones I wanted to check off. It's a great pleasure and a privilege to be here, Al.
It's also funny because we actually live down the road from each other, and we're now filming over Zoom, which is quite ridiculous. But there we go. This is how the world is.
There will be one in person.
Absolutely. Explain what you do now very quickly. We'll come on to Ledn and everything else. And then, as ever, I'd like to go back in time and get your story because you've got a really interesting story.
Yeah. So Ledn, I'm the co-founder and chief sales officer at Ledn. That's what most people watching this show will probably associate me with if you already know of Ledn. Ledn is very simply a company that lets you use your Bitcoin as collateral to get a loan without selling it. And that is a concept that we believed on and bet on very early on. We saw Bitcoin as a reserve asset that would go up over time and that you wouldn't want to sell. And if you look at the assortment of other reserve assets that are out there, call it property, gold, stocks, it's very common to borrow against these assets. But many people do that, and it's a great tool to, if used responsibly, build wealth over time. But this wasn't available for Bitcoin when we set out. And it was really intended to solve our own problem, which is we had some Bitcoin, we wanted more of it. Nobody gave us a loan. So we decided to go out and build it. And we've been doing this for over 6 years. We have the longest track record and and the most battle-tested platform around. And that's why so many people come to us to basically get their loan services met.
We'll talk about the battles and all of those things in due course. But let's hear your story. How did you get into all of this?
Hi, Raoul here. Listen, I think we've got until 2030 before the economic singularity arrives. Now, it might not be the exact date, but it's around then. So we have about 6 years to figure out how to unfuck our future. I've put together a report to help you called Prepare for 2030. It's going to help you take the first steps in that journey to make sure you're secure past 2030. So just click on the link below and start your journey now.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I'll try to condense it as best as I can. But as you know, and people that I've are familiar with my story, I was born and raised in Venezuela, and I was exposed to the failures of money fairly quickly on in my life. So my family finds Bitcoin in the middle of hyperinflation and an ungodly authoritarian regime that we had in Venezuela. And the way we found it, we came to it, was very different than other people. And so to tell you the story, it was my youngest brother who started mining Bitcoin back in 2014 in Venezuela. And
how did he discover it?
So he was, a friend of his was in Houston, and he had caught word of Bitcoin, and he wanted to start mining Bitcoin in Houston. But the problem was that Houston had very high electricity costs. And one of the inputs of Bitcoin mining is a lot of energy, internet plus the hardware, and then the output is Bitcoin. But his friend had grown up in Venezuela, had many relatives still there, and knew that Venezuela's hydro or power was heavily subsidized. To give you an example, at the time, you could pay for the full month hydro bill of a 4-bedroom house with 30 cents, maybe a quarter. So it was as close to free as it could probably get. And so my brother's friend basically called my brother and said, "Hey, I know where to find these machines. I know how to use them. I don't have free power here, but you do. I'm going to send you some machines. You should buy some and we should mine together." And so that was how my youngest brother finds out.
What was he doing beforehand, your youngest brother?
My youngest brother had just graduated university. And interestingly, I come from a very entrepreneurial family. And so my dad always wanted us to pursue setting up our own businesses. So every one of us, after we graduated, my dad acted as our angel, and we would basically we had to pitch him on a business idea. And once he got behind it, he gave us a little, angel check or the funds to kind of take a first crack at the bat. So I'd taken my crack, my middle brother had taken his crack, and now it was my youngest brother's turn. And so he was at this point sourcing business ideas to present to my dad to basically do his venture. And my dad really wanted him to leave the country. My family really wanted him to get out, because by then I was out, my middle brother was out, and the country was just falling off a cliff. Everybody was forced selling and liquidating everything. This is why we had millions % inflation, because hyperinflation is not rational. Hyperinflation is emotional. And hyperinflation is a result of you losing all faith in the government being able to steer the ship. And you are basically market selling everything you can to take the money out. You don't really care what the price is. You stop doing the math, because the exchange is moving so fast that whatever math you do won't be the settlement you get once you place the trade. So you just start basically thinking in extremes, and you just say, I want whatever you give me for it. And therefore, asset prices get completely depressed in real terms. Nominal terms, they might still be okay. But when you go and try to get the currency out, that's when you really get crushed, because the currency is what's getting debased to infinity. Nobody wants to hold it. So the country's falling apart. My parents are strongly encouraging my youngest brother to do something abroad. But my youngest brother doesn't want to leave. And I know it sounds crazy to not want to leave a place like Venezuela, but what people don't often appreciate about migrating is that there's the financial element and there's the economic element, but you also have to consider all the people that you can't take with you. So relatives, family, the people that gave you that raised you, the friends that taught you a lot of the things you knew, the people you work with, your employees. It creates this very big toll on you to basically leave and see others that can't or aren't as suited to do so. So I understood where he was coming from. I applaud the spirit of fighting when the fight is fair, right? But in Venezuela, it wasn't a fair fight. Still, he didn't want to leave. So my dad, very reluctantly, because by the time he pitched the Bitcoin opportunity, he had already pitched like 6 or 7 other things. And my dad was just at his limit saying, please leave. Like, I'm not going to support anything that requires staying here. But by the time he presents the Bitcoin opportunity, my brother had gotten so much conviction around Bitcoin from his research and speaking to his friends that were doing it, that he gave my dad pretty much like an ultimatum. And he was like, you either fund this or I'm leaving the house. I am going to do this with or without you. So, you can either support me or not. And so my dad sends me the white paper that night. I had gone to business school, so he wanted me to, check this out from a financial point of view. So I take a look at the white paper. It wasn't to me that moment where when I read the white paper and all of a sudden I saw the Matrix. I read the white paper, and what I thought about it at the beginning was, okay, here are the miners. The miners are sort of the protectors of the network. They do the heavy lifting so that the network is kept safe and orderly and propose the transactions to the nodes. And because of this, they use a lot of power. They use a lot of internet and the hardware. The hardware is the same no matter where you buy it from. The internet can change depending on where you are, and the energy can change depending on where you are. In Venezuela, we had the cheapest energy and the cheapest hydro, and we were buying the same ASICs as everyone else. So I thought we had a big edge. And the output of that activity was a globally sellable asset, which in Venezuela meant you could sell it in a market that wasn't subject to the capital controls and horrible restrictions.
And it's not a mass liquidation market that everything else was.
Correct. And everybody wants it. So you had a good that you could produce that the world wanted and that you could buy with US dollars in a market where you couldn't sell anything for its real true value. And all the money or instruments around you were getting either hyperinflated away, or you were getting punished by hoarding, they said, more than one house, hoarding more than one car, hoarding more than 4 tires. Because you started trading away the bolivars for anything that would store its value. But as you kept these store of value assets, the government basically started coming after the stockpiles of anything that you were monetizing, because what they really wanted you was to hold the hot potato they were printing that nobody wanted to hold. But then, in the middle of this, my brother brings the machines. He found a way of basically monetizing, in many ways, a government subsidy into an output that could be sold globally for the thing that everybody wanted, which was US dollars. And
it's kind of cute that you're actually arbitraging the government subsidies and getting dollars out the other side. It's like payback.
Poetic. It's poetic. And this is exactly what people in China were doing too. And this is exactly because a lot of these authoritarian/communist regimes, they buy your vote with subsidies. And Bitcoin is a very beautiful way of flying those subsidies and that attempt to purchase my will back on you and mirror it back to you. And basically use it to put more pressure on you to do the right thing. So when he starts mining it, clearly he's ecstatic because he's doing very, very well. And so he starts growing the mine. And, as people come to him, he's the only guy in Venezuela walking around with a smile. Everyone else is forced liquidating everything, whereas my brother is saying, oh, you're leaving? Do you have any space available? Can I rent your industrial space? What's the electricity capacity
He's got a
of your
free money machine going.
So then, not surprisingly, all of my brother's friends start saying, what are you doing? Teach me more about this. How can you be in a position to rent a place where everyone else is giving them up for free and you were the one taking the lease? How? And then friends start asking, what are you doing? He says, I'm mining Bitcoin. Let me show you how. And so he starts touring people around his facilities. He starts helping his friends mine. He starts helping. My dad starts mining. My brother starts mining. My cousins start mining. My uncles start mining.
Of course.
Everyone starts mining. In Venezuela, there was a point where I would say probably 60 or 70% of every electrical outlet had some form of GPU, ASIC, or other type of miner plugged into it. It became a viral phenomenon because you could basically plug into the wall and get hard money out of it. And it was brilliant at the time. So a few things started becoming clear as more and more people got set up with mining, which was mining in many ways has fiat expenses. So you have to pay hydro, you have to buy the machines, you have to pay for the electrical upgrades, you have to pay for the costs of the mine. Most of the system still runs in fiat, but the activity itself generates Bitcoin. So you had Bitcoin income, fiat outputs. And what everybody wanted was more Bitcoin and to grow the mine. So at the time, your only other choice, because your only source of revenue was the mining activity and was Bitcoin, you had no real choice but to sell that Bitcoin output to buy more machines, right? And back then, those who were mining will remember that the lead time for a Bitmain order was about 9 months. Sometimes it could take over a year. And so what started happening was miners, by the second upgrade cycle of their equipment, they quickly learned that they shouldn't be selling the Bitcoin because in the year that it took to get the machine, Bitcoin had more than tripled and you lost all the upside because you had to let go of your Bitcoin. So people started looking for financing solutions to obtain the cash they needed without selling the Bitcoin. And at this time, I was mentioning to you, everybody was building mines and people were coming to us because we were the miners to teach them how to mine. So we were helping people all over Venezuela. I was helping people in Florida. And at this time, I'm going back and forth between Canada and Venezuela, like banging my head against the wall because I don't have free power and my family does. And everybody said, come mine here, come mine with us. But in my mind, I was torn because I knew that anything that was helping the people in Venezuela and had a sort of a spirit of freedom and a spirit of liberty would eventually get in the radar of the government, and we would eventually become the bad guys because we were doing something good, as everyone else did. So smartly, also my wife, who I owe a lot of credit to, she was also pushing me not to take the Venezuela route, which many saw as the sort of the easy way, which was yes, go try to take over or go try to make the most of some subsidies in a broken economy. She said, if this is the future, do something here. Find a way to generate value and go talk to people here. I'm sure there's got to be Bitcoiners here in Canada. So I started going to the meetups. I wanted to set up a mine in Canada to keep doing what I knew how to do. Canada had the cheapest power in the free world. It's very expensive still. So we set up a mine in Canada with my best friend from university, Adam Reeds, who's the co-founder of Ledn. And then same problems. Bitcoin revenue, fiat expenses, but at this time we were in Canada. So we said, certainly in this beacon of development, somebody will give us $1 loan backed by the Bitcoin. And so we asked, some private lenders. We went to some banks. Every single person laughed us out of the room. They said, it's not an asset. Who would do that? Why would you want to do that? I don't get it. And then at that point, Adam and I said, this is our chance to solve our problem and to really deliver value by building something we know people want. And we set out to build Canada's first Bitcoin-backed loan.
What were you doing before then?
At the time, I was working in my fiat life prior to Bitcoin. I was a vice president of sales and marketing at a real estate development construction in Toronto. And that was my fiat life. I had, now, once I found Bitcoin through my brother, it was so, and Bitcoiners will relate to this. It was so hard to think about anything else. It was so hard for me to think about this fiat job. Nothing felt exciting in comparison to Bitcoin. And so I went to my boss, who was my dad's cousin actually, and I said to her, I can only do this part time. I need half of my day to sort of start nurturing this other venture that I'd like to do, this mining business or this Bitcoin thing. I want to make sure that I want to do whatever I can to be a part of this industry. And that took me through, I was able to keep that for about 3 months. But as I got more, as I learned more about Bitcoin, I realized you can't have your cake and eat it too. Like I'm an entrepreneur by nature. Thank you for everything. I need to do this. And so I quit my fiat job at the time, and I went full steam ahead with Bitcoin. And in fact, I didn't collect a paycheck from that moment on until many, many years after when Ledn was at scale. So
what happened to your brother's business?
So good question. So my brother's facility,
as I kind of know where this is going. Everybody knows where this is going, but
yeah. So
let's hear the story.
So sure enough, in the cycle of when Bitcoin goes in this hype cycle for 2017, and the world finds out what it is, because up until it went to 20K, no one really knew what it was.
And Venezuela was really bad at that point.
We were in the middle of hyperinflation, and I still remember it was a horrible time in the country.
Do you remember that the average weight of a Venezuelan fell by, it was like 10 kilos?
Oh, so many stats, Raoul. Yeah. So during this, Venezuela also, for those unfamiliar, has been the victim of the greatest migration crisis in the continental Americas. Okay. From the time Chavez has been in power, more than 7 million Venezuelans have fled, myself included. This is a country that had 29 million people when Chavez took office. It's more than a quarter of the population of the country ejected. And it's not just ejected. All 7 million of us didn't leave on planes with visas. The large majority of those people were basically part of what you're seeing today as the refugee crisis, right? And so this was happening. And meanwhile, the only people in the country that were smiling were the miners. And oh man, it's going to be hard to keep this condensed. But in 2017, many will remember the Venezuelan regime's attempt at shitcoining and stealing money from rightful investors, which was called the petro. And when the petro came out, I remember many people unfamiliar with the country were saying, oh my God, countries are adopting this technology. This is amazing. The petro had many functions, but not one of them was to help the Venezuelan people. Okay. The functions of the petro were, number one, he tried to put up some asset that he could sell with his fraudulent ways to try to convince people to trade their valuable Bitcoin and their valuable Ethereum for this worthless petrol thing that was absolutely garbage. But he was desperate for cash. He couldn't access the debt markets. He was sanctioned. So he said, oh, let me try to sell this thing to the Bitcoiners and see if Bitcoiners are dumb enough to give me their hard asset in exchange for this mirror. Right. And nobody said, it was a complete failure in terms of raising funds. Nobody bought it and nobody used it. But the second thing that the petro did, if you remember back to the petro, once he was launching the petro, he started doing these awareness campaigns around the petro throughout the country. The petro, to put it in context, was never meant to be mined. The petro was a fully centralized coin that had no ASA component to it, no decentralization to it. Yet, when you went to every single one of these events, there was an ASIC, there was a GPU rig, it was on, they showed you the sound it made, they showed you the heat footprint, they showed you the electrical charge.
So people were now thinking, oh, this is another free money machine like Bitcoin.
It was an education campaign for his cronies to be able to identify private miners and extort them and harass them to take over their equipment. This was a roadshow to let them know how to find these things. This is a covert roadshow for them to learn how to identify these things. This was in December 2018. Not surprisingly, in January 2018, all the miners start getting these suspicious visitors to their facilities. Okay, these are people dressed as utility company people, people dressed as municipal tax people, knocking on your door, saying, "Hey, we're seeing you using a lot of power. What was the reason for this upgrade?" And anyways, when everybody was fleeing, they kind of knew that anyone upgrading power or still using their power was doing something that, warranted a second look to see if they could get a free money machine, right? So, because most factories were just shutting down, you see their base loads drop. Most houses were shutting down, base loads drop because people were leaving. Yet you had these pockets of increased loads. So they started, basically, miners started getting harassed by these, at the time, fake utility reps, fake municipality reps, fake police. By fake, I mean corrupt and crony. And of course, not surprisingly, the extortment threats began shortly after. I'll tell you what happened to my brother, which was the easiest way to explain it. They bust into his facility. They broke the door into his facility. Luckily, he wasn't there. They seized all of the equipment, from the fans to cool the facility, to the laptop he had there, to the LAN network equipment, to the 20-some ASICs he had in that facility. And they call him and they said, if you want your machines back, if you want to not go to jail, you need to give us $25,000 plus the machines. And my dad said, my brother says, why? I'm not doing anything illegal. Like this, why do I have to give you $25,000? Why do you need to take my machines? Well, because these machines finance terrorism. And you say, how do these machines finance terrorism? Excuse me. It's like, well, because basically they start throwing these arbitrary charges because Bitcoin mining at the time was completely unregulated. There was no regulation to define what Bitcoin was or what the activity was. And you weren't financing anything. You were just spending power and earning an asset that you kept. And so they started basically trying to scare or threat miners into giving up their equipment and outright many times just stealing the equipment. So my brother, we tried to kind of find a middle ground with these people. We try to go back and forth and say, no, well, this is not like, let's get due process. Like, why jail? Like, there's not even but they said, give it to us or else, give it to us or else. Towards the end, it turns into, I know where your kids go to school. I know where you live. I know where your business is. You have basically until tomorrow morning to settle or you're going to jail. And I would keep my family close if I were you, right? This happens at around 8 p.m. Okay. He calls my dad and I, basically in nervous crying and says, I don't know what to do. And we said, you have to go to the border. You have to bolt. You have to leave. And so in a matter of 2 hours, he has to pack his life into a car with his wife and 2 kids and transit the most dangerous stretch of road in America or in the continental Americas, which is the
Darien Gap.
Not the Darien. This was from Venezuela. This is from the center of Venezuela, which is where we live. Barquisimeto, if you throw a dart at the country's in the dead center. And he had to bolt to the border with Colombia. More importantly, he had to bolt to a particular border in Colombia that has no cell phone coverage. In case these fraudulent instructions already been sent to any of the border sites that were connected to the grid. He didn't have much time. Keep in mind that this is the most dangerous part on a crime and murder per capita basis. This is the most dangerous country in the planet at this time, still is. And there is no fuel in the country. So he has to basically beg for his friends around him for extra fuel to basically load tanks that will go in the car, which is incredibly risky, to basically be able to refuel and meet the 8-hour journey to get to the border. So he takes off and, manages to get to the border, crosses the border, and my family from that point on fled. And, we fought the charges. The charges were dismissed after many, many years, but my family never went back. My brother now lives in Spain. My parents live in Italy. I live in Cayman. And while I will always say that finding Bitcoin and hyperinflation is a blessing, and I love the life that I live today, it's incredibly painful to have to separate your family after you were so united. I was super close with my family growing up. We were we were a unit. And now I see them once a year. Now I do Zoom birthdays. Now I do Zoom Christmas, and Bitcoin fixes a lot of things, but it can't fix that, right? And so this is why I have a bit of a different view when it comes to Bitcoiners and politics, because I do believe that the highest ROI thing we can do if you've been successful in Bitcoin is to go back to politics and try to fix the root of the issue. Because we cannot opt out forever. There will eventually be no places to opt out to.
Most people see Venezuela and say, yeah, but that was different. That's hyperinflation. People don't realize the debasement of currency is happening on a globalized basis of all fiat currency by about 8% a year by my measure. Right? That's 8% a year. Your money's being devalued. Add a 3% inflation on top. It's 11% a year you're getting poorer. And that's almost a more cruel way. At least with hyperinflation, you kind of know what's happening. This, nobody understands it. They just get angry and angrier that they're getting left behind. And then it takes a while. And once you realize if you can denominate yourself in Bitcoin, the problem goes away entirely.
It does. And listen, now, going back to this theme of politics, right? Bitcoin can either be an agent for change or an agent for you to opt out. In the case of Argentina, is an agent for change because it was able to put so much pressure. People in Argentina were able to opt out of their own currency. And when you opt out of your own currency, you basically throw the fiat that they're printing back into their pot. And it keeps moving around and creates this heat and this friction that they just can't sustain. And eventually the pain on the population is so much that they go to the polls and they elect someone else. In Venezuela, we've gone to the polls. The polls were taken away from us. All the Bitcoin in the world won't give you a fair election in Venezuela. So all you have left in Venezuela is to use the Bitcoin to get out. It's like the raft you use from Cuba to sail to the US. It's the same thing. There's virtually no way of using your Bitcoin to affect political change and restore democracy in Venezuela other than funding the opposition party, which, by the way, Bitcoin is the only way you can send them a donation because they've been blocked out of the banking system by the incumbents.
Out of interest, why the fuck didn't the US ever get involved? Was it because of the oil and they just wanted the oil off the market? Why? I've never understood such a huge, potentially resource-rich, all the farms got stolen, all the food supplies got destroyed, the oil system got destroyed. Why did the Americans allow it?
So without trying to come off as politically biased, right?
You should be. You're Venezuelan. You've seen the situation. There should be a reason.
So one of the biggest points of frustration for me was how foreign policy in the U.S. allowed Chavez to perpetuate its grip over America, over the continental America, right? If you look at, and I think that came because of a few reasons. One, the U.S. was in its Obama era, so the U.S. was looking inwards. The U.S. was not looking outwards. They were focused on foreign policy in the Middle East. They were focused on foreign policy in Europe, but they certainly weren't looking at foreign policy and what was happening in America. Because I saw it happen. Chavez, and this is one of the funny things that happen when you're in a commodity-based country. Chavez wins the election in Venezuela. This is a maniac that came from an army, had never been a politician, and ran on a populist agenda. Okay? The interesting thing about commodity markets is when they see the fourth largest oil producer in the world get taken over by a wacko, is that it makes the commodity that country produces soar in price because it assumes they were not going to be able to produce it at that rate anymore. And so you have this really poisoned feedback loop where Chavez wins the election and oil prices rally. And all of a sudden, the Venezuelan budget gets increased. Chavez has all this spending power, and he uses this new oil wealth that he himself created by his craziness and introducing that into the markets. He then takes that and starts monetizing that extra revenue by setting up allied governments in Brazil. He sets up Lula in Brazil, or Dilma in Brazil. So Brazil goes red. He sets up Rafael Correa in Ecuador. Ecuador goes red. He sets up Cristina Kirchner in Argentina. Argentina goes red.
This was all Chavez doing this.
Yes. He sets up Evo Morales in Bolivia. Bolivia goes red. And basically, he corners the superpowers in America. And he starts making a lot of noise in places like the United Nations and OAS because he learns very quickly to do these resolutions that the vote of the United States is worth the same as the vote of St. Vincent Grenadines. And so he starts going to St. Vincent Grenadines and says, hey, that airport looks awfully old. You guys should just get a brand new airport. Here's some money for the new runway. And it's like the Hugo Chavez International Airport. And now when they're up at the OAS or they're up at the UN, when some countries want to put out a resolution that says end the horrible regime of the Chavez, Chavez in Venezuela, everybody's like, abstain, deny, abstain, deny, abstain, deny. They're great. So he learns how to use democracy at a sort of intergovernment agency level to further his agenda, right? Many people remember the "it smells like sulfur" speech at the United Nations after George Bush, and people clapped at it. I remember part of me losing my mind was coming to the U.S. and Canada and getting picked up by a cab, and they would ask me where I'm from, and I'd say Venezuela, and they'd say, Chavez, my friend, smells like sulfur. And I'm like, do you know what he's doing to the country? You had Joseph Stiglitz, Nobel laureate economist, raving about Chavez's policies on the New York Times. It was bizarro world. It was bizarro world. So I think that was a huge strategic mistake on behalf of the U.S. Massive, because, hey, that not my problem back in 2008. Where's your migration crisis coming from right now?
Yeah, but I think my personal opinion is they let it implode on purpose because obviously it's very heavy crude in Venezuela. They couldn't refine it. They didn't have the ability, so it just got taken off the market. And guess what? The US is the world's largest crude oil producer. And so they're like, great, you keep them out of action. We don't need to do anything. Slap some sanctions on as well. And they're entirely out of the equation.
Yes, and not to mention that there's something also very, I don't know what the right word to say it is, but it's almost like nefarious about the way immigration works. Why? Because when the country starts falling apart, the people that are first to leave are your most qualified business owners, highly educated.
You saw that in Miami, right? They all, rich people went to Miami first, bought all the fancy apartments, all Venezuelans and Argentinians.
Correct. And so you scoop the top, right? You're saying this country falls apart. To your point, strategic oil production benefits for America, great. Then you get strategic GDP per capita because you're bringing in the creme of the crop.
They must have sold billions of dollars of Miami apartments for the rich Venezuelans.
The problem becomes, there's a saying when you talk to enough immigrants that have had to go through this, there's a saying that goes, the first immigrants leave by plane. They get investor visas. The second immigrants leave by bus. They got work permits. The third immigrants, they walk across with nothing. The first immigrants, everybody wants. The second immigrants, not such a big burden. The third immigrants, you got a crisis. And so no one bats an eye when it's these guys or when it's these guys. But by the time you get to these, the gates cannot be closed. And so that's the problem, is that the early stages of a collapse of a country or a failing nation benefit everyone around them, right? The trade partners benefit because they produce less. They have to buy more things from them. They also benefit from the new migration that's coming in their way because it's phenomenal. People migrate their capital, so their financial systems get better because you eject your money from the existing financial system and you start moving it to banks in your neighbor countries. Everybody benefits when a whale dies at first, except the people that can't leave the whale, right? Like you're getting eaten. Everybody's eating you. And so you get to this very unfortunate point where Chavez's government got, in cahoots with the military. They they basically started taking over and I'll say this openly, the Venezuelan regime is the biggest organized crime group in the planet. I'm, fairly certain that they're involved in drug trafficking at a state level across the world. And so when you have a government that cannot get voted out, or a government that is basically so far gone with what they've done that the second democracy is reinstated, you have a one-way ticket to The Hague, right? You have a one-way ticket to jail. Is if you're Maduro and his cronies. If you or anyone in the military that has enabled this, you have a one-way ticket to jail. You're both one of the same group. Are you going to allow democracy? Hell no. And so
that's the same with Assad in Syria. You have to go to the end. You will end up being killed, and it's how long it is before you get killed.
You got it. And so right now, there's people ask me, what's next for Venezuela? Is there a chance for change? Is there a chance for change? And my answer is, I don't see it. I don't see it because we've tried the democratic way. The Venezuelan government is the Venezuelan army. The army shoots real bullets at us in the protests. I have heard them go, and that's exactly the point where I'm like, okay, we gotta leave. I have photos of me throwing back smoke grenades in the protest with my friends back when you could still protest. It was those protests when some of my friends started dropping and never coming back up. And that was when I said to myself, it's not a fair fight. It's not worth fighting for. I would rather fight and build a tool that lets more people get out. And that's what I did.
That story alone explains why you've been so passionate about Bitcoin, right? Because it matters not as a business opportunity. It matters at a personal level as a way to give financial freedom, or not just financial freedom, but freedom to people that didn't exist. Now, whether it's in any regime, whether it's in Iran or whether it's in Syria or whether it's in anywhere, it's giving people a chance.
Yes. Once I saw what Bitcoin did for people in Venezuela, for me, it's been always very obvious that the world doesn't live like the U.S. If you think about the world as, is the world like where I'm living right now? Like, how many people get this shared life experience of a stable currency and a strong democracy and no assassinations for your presidents, or no coup d'etats? Like, how many people get to experience that? It's a fraction, right? Most of the people I spoke with in my travels lived in some way or form much more similar to how we live in Venezuela. And when I saw the way we were able to opt out, I knew everyone would want the same. And the fact that you don't want to opt out in the US yet, or in Europe yet, is because of strategic reasons, but the mechanics are the same. The mechanics are all the same. It's just you have different strategic advantages because your domino in the fiat system is way farther here.
It's also just slower, so the migration's slower. I've always said it's a migration into this new system, but because they're not abusing it to excess, really how I think about it is what we're all paying is about call it a 10% a year put option on the system, because when you devalue your currency, the collateral values go up and the system doesn't go bust. So you're actually paying 10% for a put option to not have the big debt unraveling. Is that terrible? Maybe not. But it's still significant because it hurts people and it holes out the middle classes and stuff, but it does it over time. So over time, you see the migration. You didn't have the mass rush that you had in Venezuela and other countries, but it's still happening and people are migrating. And even Larry Fink talks about it, and nobody really wants to admit to the debasement of currency, but we know it. So let's get to the story of Ledn. So you and Adam decide to set up a lending business. Is that right? Was that the first iteration as was? Yeah.
That's right. So we wanted to solve our own problem, which was we needed to pay our bills in fiat, but we didn't want to sell our Bitcoin. So we wanted a product where you could put your Bitcoin as collateral, get the cash you need. When you repay the cash, you get the Bitcoin back. Pretty simple, right? Same thing you can do with your house or even your phone. People lease phones and they lease all sorts of assets, but nobody was lending against Bitcoin. And I saw a huge potential in that. It was an asset that lent itself for a lot more transparency. You as a user could have a lot more visibility on what we did and make sure we did what we said we would do. The second was, it's a global asset. So if I could get it right in Canada, we could bring this product to everyone else. And that was a really exciting part for us. And the third part was, because the asset was global, it was the first time in my understanding of history that I could treat you, Raoul, in the Caymans and your Bitcoin in the same way as Miguel from Baruta, which is a small town in Caracas, with his Bitcoin, because I was judging the credit quality not on you, but on your asset. And for the first time ever, your asset and his asset were the same.
Yeah, because this is the first, and I say this a lot, this is the first globally homogenous asset. Gold is the other one, I'll give it that, but gold is not as easily tradable. You have the quality standards. You don't know. It's not the same thing. But this is a truly homogenous global asset. The same in Caracas as it is in Lagos, as it is in New York City.
And you're right. And gold, by the way, gold in a vault in Venezuela, it's not worth the same as gold in a vault in the U.S. A Bitcoin and cold storage controlled by someone in Venezuela that can be sent to me is worth the exact same as the Bitcoin controlled by your cold storage that could be sent to me. The exact same. So I really can, and this is one of the things that fills me with pride today, is that at Ledn, a person from Colombia and a person from the US applying for the same loan will get the same interest rate. And I don't think there's a single bank or financial entity in the world that can say the same thing. And that is what I think leveling the playing field is and looks like. And many people don't get that yet.
So you launched Ledn. How do you start acquiring customers? What does it look like first? Then we'll go through the battle, and then we'll talk about where we are now and where it's going.
So building trust in an industry that is designed not to trust but verify is an interesting exercise, and has been one of the most intellectually exciting things I think I've ever done, is to turn somebody that is designed not to trust into trusting a solution that ultimately requires you to trust them taking care of your Bitcoin while you have the loan. So a lot of that stuff, a lot of our first clients were early Bitcoiners that knew me for many, many years back, that had seen my family story, that had seen what we were trying to build and who we were as people, and trusting us. Frankly, trusting us. We built the platform that was fully regulated, fully up to speed with all the existing regulation. We went and set up ourselves with BitGo, which at the time was the only qualified custodian. So it was a way of showing people we're working with the best in class here, so that you can feel safe. That we want to have the best of everything, right? And so the first clients were miners and industry owners in the Bitcoin space, particularly in Canada, and many of them were prominent figures in the Bitcoin community. So when they took loans from us, it made other people curious. Also, at Ledn, in the early days, we were just like the industry we were building on. We wanted people not to trust us, but to verify. So at Ledn, you could see our first clients could see that their collateral asset that they sent us on chain remain on that address, and that the assets stayed there for the duration of their loan. So we opened ourselves up for verification.
But what's to stop you, or not you, but a bad actor doing the same thing? Just saying, well, there it is on chain, I check it, and then you just take it and fuck off with the Bitcoin.
For sure. So that was the other thing that we wanted to assure people, like, we are happy to be regulated. The Canadian government and all of the regulators, wherever we have been only upfront and above board about our activity, right? That was what we saw value in having a regulated entity. If we run away, you can sue us. You can come after us. We are here. They know who we are. And we're not running away here. And that was another thing that Ledn was very different about. We wanted to put the faces of the people at the front of the business, because this industry was getting everything was getting abstracted away. It's like it's always a contract. It's always a contract. For us, we wanted people to understand that there were real people behind this that have made this our life's project and our life's work to basically build something that we always wished we would have had. And I see a massive opportunity if we can get this right. So we've always been people first. I've always put my hand up and said, if you have any questions on this business, come to us. We're going to be here when the market's up. We're going to be here when the market's down. You're always going to be able to talk to us. And so that was when we started getting that first base of clients. Okay. And this was in 2018. And if you remember, 2018 to 2019, 2020, it was a pretty dark period. So we were grinding in the bear market for about 2 years, right? Then we started getting some upside towards the end of 2019. Things started doing fairly well. And then COVID hits. And basically we had the market crashes from $8,000 to $3,000. And because we are Bitcoin collateralized loans, when the value of the Bitcoin drops and the client either doesn't top up or doesn't want to top up, we have to sell Bitcoin to make the loan whole. So that forces loans to get closed and liquidated. And as any other platform back then, there were liquidations for our book. And I distinctly remember I got on the phone. At the time, we had, I think it was just north of 400 clients. I got on the phone with every single one of them. And I wanted them to understand, why we had to do what we had to do. I knew we wanted to share that we didn't want to close your loan. It hurts us. It brings down our book. The last thing we want is for a loan to get liquidated because you come to us because you don't want to sell it. We work very hard to earn your trust and build a book. When the liquidation happens, both of us lose. So I wanted to go to them and say, we did everything we could, but unfortunately, this is the reality of our business. If the price goes down, I don't have any other collateral than to sell your loan. And they said, many of them cried on the phone with me. It was almost a therapeutic, week for me. It was a hard process, but I called every single one of them. And at the time, our book was fairly decimated, after that drop. And people were questioning, Bitcoin. They were questioning, is this going to be around? Bitcoin had $3,000. Our view with Ledn, when you build a team of people that have such high conviction on something, it's going to take a lot more than that to shake us off. So our view at Ledn was, we're just going to put our heads down and we're going to keep working. And we're going to work through this, whether it's a global pandemic, whether it's whatever it is, we're just going to put our heads down and keep working. And so shortly after, they announced the stimmy checks. And Bitcoin goes, whoop, 3 to 5. And then we start seeing a lot of the clients that had gotten liquidated just a few weeks ago come back and basically take our services many times to buy more Bitcoin. And we had noticed that they were coming back, and they were also bringing their friends. We saw people from similar addresses all bringing in, more and more Bitcoin. And I got talking to a few of them, and they said, oh, Mao, don't worry. I mean, I had positions, I had loans with you and a few other people. I got liquidated with all of them. But I love how you liquidated me the most. And so when I needed the service again, I love the experience that I had with you guys the best. You guys treated me great. You always reached out to me. You were always clear about what was happening. So I came back. And when my friends needed it, I suggested you guys. And so they come and use our product when Bitcoin's at 3 and at 4 and at 6 and Bitcoin goes to 12 to 20. All these people are making a lot of, they're seeing their wealth balloon.
So they're mainly borrowing to buy more Bitcoin at this point, right?
Many times, yes, but also to buy or to meet living expenses that they just didn't want to sell Bitcoin
because
for.
They want to sell Bitcoin, yeah.
And so in either case, you saw your wealth double, more than double, and then double again, and then double again. And so it creates this reflective, once you get a taste of what it is like to see Bitcoin appreciate for just holding it long term, and you understand that the value of holding it long term, nobody wants to sell it, which is a great deal of what you're seeing now, right? Like today, our numbers are exploding, but I think it's because now that we've hit $100,000, it's dawned on people that all those who hold it for four or more years do very, very well.
Without mentioning a name, but as somebody you obviously know, and I know, somebody bought, and I was at his house, who bought $2 million of Bitcoin at 3.
God bless them.
And still holds it. Well, not all. I'm sure he sold some as he's gone to cover expenses. But just the compounding of wealth from the best performing asset of all time is something I find people are so overly obsessed with the cyclicality that they don't see the secular trend. I mean, it's,
I
if you'd have bought those Bitcoin at 3,500 that were for sale, I think I was buying at 6,000 back in 2020. Just do nothing.
But life happens. And so that's why, again, it's people ask me, it's funny, like, how do you sell loans and stuff? Loans, you don't, nobody wakes up and says, it's a great day to take a loan. I really feel like taking a loan today. You're going about your life. Something comes up, whether it's an investment opportunity, a capital call, Bitcoin's $2 million and you want to upsize your house. Things happen in your life. And, I'll always say this to people. If you can find the dollars without borrowing them, or find the dollars from a bank without having to put your Bitcoin as collateral, you can get a better rate. Definitely, like, use your portfolio as you see fit. But most people don't understand they're sitting on the world's best collateral.
Yeah, the only issue with the collateral, it's a 70 vol asset.
Correct.
So your probability of getting called is higher than if you're borrowing against a house. Just simple as that.
Correct. But there's ways of understanding that vol going into it and planning accordingly, right? Because I have clients, like, our loans start at 50% loan to value. We built a cushion to withstand that volatility, and so that it's a product that you can go to bed at night, right? And you don't have to, you're not on this constant fear of liquidation. We've built quite a few tools to help you meet top-ups if you need to, or margin calls if you need to. We've created this option where you can leave a set amount on your custody account, your transaction account, and the system just sweeps it when the loan needs it. If you're going to be traveling, or if you're going to be indisposed. Sometimes people over collateralize it. Like, some people, you can also work out the math. You say, I want to put enough Bitcoin here so that this thing won't get sold until we hit a price of 5K. And some people go and do that proactively. By the way, we let you take out the excess collateral too, right? It's so we've also built a tool that lends itself so that people can protect themselves in as many ways as they can.
So you survived 2020, you build a book, everything's great. 2022 happens, and the entire lending industry nukes. Not easy building a business in this industry. That much I'll tell you.
No, it's and unfortunately, people wrongfully associated the collapse of lending in 2022 with the activity itself. Lending against your Bitcoin is something that can be done very simply, very responsibly, and I would argue with better assurances than lending against any other asset. If I'm taking your Bitcoin and I'm keeping it in custody and I'm lending you dollars, it's very hard to mess that up.
Are you not hampered by the fact there's no smart contracts? Because you could make it even easier.
So,
or you can use wrapped Bitcoin as well. That's all coming and stuff.
Yeah, so there's ways of doing it in centralized and decentralized, and there's ways that you can do it through a smart contract. Our view is that Bitcoin, to your point, you can't program smart contracts on Bitcoin. So we give you a legal contract, right? Like, we work with a qualified custodian on the back. Here's the legal contract. It says what we're going to do. It shows you where it's going to be. And you meet your obligations. We meet ours. You get the Bitcoin back. So it wasn't a limiting factor, because we bridge the two worlds, right? Like, so we give you the services that you would get at a fintech with the uptime that you get in Bitcoin and crypto, and the responsiveness that you get in Bitcoin and crypto. So we've basically built a product that can give you a lot of those traditional financial and banking type services that you need, but you can't get in this industry. And we needed to do that so that it would map the working hours of our clients. And the working hours of our clients are always, all the time. So we built this service that lets you do that. Mind you, if you come out and you get a loan application and you want $1 million dispersed on a Saturday, we'll have to wait for the banks to reopen. I'm sorry. But if you're asking for that disbursement to be done on stablecoins, you'll get it. It's basically like a smart contract that lives and breathes.
So you're saying that there were two different types of lending markets. There was the kind of over-collateralized Bitcoin lending that you guys were doing. And then there was, I guess, the intermarket broker, market maker lending stuff that was going on with Three Arrows. Did that not pollute you? Did it not? I mean, how did your book survive that? Because most people didn't survive, regardless of what they were doing.
So the answer is it's a multi-part answer, but like I was saying earlier, the collapse of the entities in 2022 was not because of what they were doing, it's because of how they were doing it, right? So if I'm servicing a loan to you and you give me your Bitcoin and I keep it safe and I give you the dollars you need and then I just wait, that is very difficult to mess up. If you're giving me the Bitcoin and I'm giving you the dollars, then I'm turning around and I'm lending that Bitcoin to someone else. And I don't know what that someone else is doing with that Bitcoin. Or they're giving me another asset in collateral and I'm going out and trading that other asset because I want to make that extra juice on the assets that I'm holding. That's when you open the company up for all sorts of problems.
You and I talked about this over a glass of wine the other night. The issue is in a bull market when there's somebody driving the cost of borrowing down or the lending up, you become uncompetitive because you're not doing the rehypothecation, relending, so you can't offer higher yields. That's hard, right?
That was very hard. And we did lose a lot of client assets to places like Celsius or Voyager at the time because they were dangling carrots in front of clients that were off market. They were paying 14 when we were paying 10. And back then, I remember these conversations because some of these are still fresh in my mind because I'm a very competitive guy, right? And I want to keep my book. I want to keep my clients. And when somebody came to me and said, hey, I'm going to Celsius because they're paying me 12, I said, first of all, I respect competition. I welcome competition. I do this for a living. I don't know where I could deploy that and earn enough to pay you 12 and sleep at night. So you should ask them how they're getting 12. I'll show you where my 10 is coming from. You are giving me those dollars and I'm paying you 10 and I'm lending those dollars on the other side at 12. My rates are posted. My spread is 2. You can see it. It's a sustainable business. How can they be paying you 12 when they're turning around and lending that money at 1? How if their posted loan rates range from 6 to 1. So how are they paying you the 12? But in the bull market, to your point, Raoul, nobody asked those questions. And also, there was no regulatory guidance on what you could or couldn't do as one of these operators. So when you sprinkle zero interest rate environment with a hyper growth industry and no diligence from the client side, the result 99 times out of 100 is going to be trouble. And so we didn't partake in any of this stuff. So for example, Ledn has only supported a handful of assets that are deeply liquid: USDC, USDT, Bitcoin, and we just added Ethereum. During that 2022, we didn't even support Ethereum. So as you start adding more and more of these assets, the biggest flags for me were the platform has a token. Like the platforms with tokens have all sorts of ways of doing financial engineering and shenanigans to print that thing and to play games with it. So that was the first one. The second one was, how many assets do you support? Because there's assets that are liquid, as you know, and there's assets that are not. If I'm letting you take a loan on smoking chicken fish, which prime or which bank am I going to post that for liquidity? Right? Like what serious player will take something like that? Yet it's the quickest way to add assets on your platform because everybody wants you to support the new fastest growing thing. And when you support it and you add financial services for it, all of a sudden that community now loves you. Right? And now what the groups like Celsius were doing is they were adding anything under the sun. Chainlink, Doge, Dog, whatever came out, they were supporting it. You could offer yield on something, but if that something doesn't have demand for a yield service on the other side, you then have to go take that smoking chicken fish, turn it into Bitcoin, lend the Bitcoin, and you need to hedge both legs because there can be a situation where Bitcoin crashes and smoking chicken fish doesn't. So what these guys were doing is they were opening themselves up to asset liability, so asset mismatch. So you owed something, but you held something else. Then they had another problem, which was duration mismatch. They were taking open term deposits and investing it in 5-year payout mining infrastructure projects. When people show up to get their money back, you can't go liquidate a mine, right? So they had asset liability mismatch. They had duration mismatch. They were supporting assets that shouldn't have been supported. There was little to no regulatory guidance.
Where does your yield come from then?
So our yield came from, on the dollar side, it came from the loans that we issued. And on the Bitcoin side, where we did underwrite, or we still do underwrite credit, we took what we thought were very basic risk management principles and guidelines that we apply here at Ledn. Like, for example, asking people for financial statements. And I know that sounds ludicrous, but back then we were the only ones asking groups like 3 Arrows for a financial statement.
Which they wouldn't give you.
They wouldn't give us, and that was why we denied loans to them 3 times, back to back to back. And they were losing it, that we were the only group that wasn't lending to them. But at the same time, we because of that, our risk team, John started saying, I don't like that other people are lending to these guys without seeing an income statement. So anyway, the point was, we didn't lend to them. We were incredibly diligent with those that we did lend to. And the other thing, which was became massively apparent with the Voyager bankruptcy, is Voyager had 63% of the entire book to one counterparty, 3 Arrows Capital.
As I said with you over drinks, I've seen this all before. This was long-term capital management. It was exactly the same story. There was one client. Yeah, there was a few other smaller ones that all got blown up, but it was one client that almost brought down the entire banking industry, prime broking industry. Same thing. And nobody knew there was one client.
So as this started unraveling, and I think, there was many other reasons, Raoul, why we survived and others didn't. Like, another example was Terra Luna. How did Ledn survive Terra Luna collapsing? Because we never deploy client assets on DeFi protocols for yield. Never. And when this thing starts unraveling, everything, by the way, is on chain. Nobody sees Ledn running for the door or withdrawing because we're not involved. But they did see Celsius and 3 Arrows withdrawing to the bejesus. And then when you start seeing people on chain withdrawing assets from a falling house of cards, you look at those entities and you're like, I want to take mine from that entity just as a precaution. And it was the abrupt request for withdrawals on Celsius and 3 Arrows that basically forced them into declaring insolvency. So that was another reason we never use.
So you guys survive just by being conservative, just running a good business, not doing stupid stuff and not getting carried away for the extra few 100 basis points, and you're going to lose clients because of it. But if you want to last in business, because then you survive. So where's the business today? How have you grown since then?
So Ledn is, I'm happy to share. Ledn, we've had the best month ever in the business in the month of November. So far, December is on track to blow November out of the water. So we, just to give you a sense, last month we originated close to, I think, $66, I believe, $million in loans for the month. So far this year, we're up to like 25, and it's the 11th. So it's, we're on average, I think we're pumping now $3 or $4 million in new loans per day. And as it stands right now, so far into December, the business is much more profitable than it ever was at the peak of 2021. We've been basically profiting. We've been profitable for well over, I would say, year and a half, almost 2 years now. And so that's been fascinating to see. The banks, they went from not wanting to pick up the phone 2 years ago to now they are our biggest funding partners. We had an event with groups like BlackRock earlier this summer. We get constant inbound from some of the names that, we would have never imagined wanted to get close to Bitcoin companies a few years back. We have great support from our investors like Dan Tapiero, who you know very well, and others. So they are incredibly excited about the future of Ledn. So that's been, a tailwind as well. And now we believe we're going to be looking at a big change of the tides in regulators globally, stemming from changing in the U.S. And then the other part is our clients are making a lot of money, Raoul. And that's the best thing for any business.
What are most people doing? Are they buying real estate, they're buying lifestyle chips, or are they still using leverage for market price action? What are people borrowing for right now?
So great question. The main use cases, we've seen a big uptick in real estate related loans. So many people are buying the house of their dreams. They've been saving for putting, whether it's a down payment or a full out purchase with a letter loan. Our loans don't have monthly interest payments. So a lot of people use them for very long-term purchases.
They don't have monthly interest payments.
No, all interest and fees accrue until you decide to repay it. So you basically buy it and you don't have to think about it other than managing your collateral LTVs until you're ready to repay the loan. And you can roll it. You know, we have clients that have rolled their loans 3 and 4 years. And the guys, and a couple of interesting ones, we had guys that use our loans to buy homes a couple of years ago. And now the value of their Bitcoin has basically more than repaid the appreciation of the Bitcoin has more than repaid the house they bought. And now they have the house and a fully repriced Bitcoin. And so those are the stories that we live for, right? Similarly, I had guys that didn't want to sell the Bitcoin, but needed to pay for medical bill or needed to pay for this. And now they're seeing their wealth double and they were able to get their service done. And so the product works, right? And that is, I think, the biggest tailwind we have going for us is that everyone that's used a product and managed it responsibly has built wealth. And they tell their friends, right? And friends try to meme, I thought you sold your Bitcoin. No, I didn't. Actually, I took a loan. I took all the upside. And so, so you bought the house and you also got the upside on the Bitcoin. How'd you do that? Actually, check out this company called Ledn. Be careful, Bitcoin's volatile, but if you do it right, you get the house and you get the Bitcoin. And so people are saying, oh my God. And so when you're thinking about buying Bitcoin, most people looking at Bitcoin today are not looking at a trade. They're looking at a 4-year position, a 3-4 year position. And you feel a lot better about a 4-year commitment when you know you can get some liquidity out of it and keep the upside at any point during those 4 years. So we have the
especially
old
because
cohort.
Most of us run 100% of our liquid net worth in crypto.
There's no half pregnant here, right? You're either on the sideline or you're fully in. And so the people that are the old cohort have seen their wealth exponentially grow. They don't want to sell it and take a capital gains tax, but also the banks won't give them anything. So they're coming to us and they're saying, I'm going to buy that house. Here, let it. Take a couple million off my Bitcoin. Give me $1 million. I'm going to go buy the house I've always wanted. And I have enough Bitcoin to manage this for the foreseeable future. Then the guys that are coming into the new position, they're saying, oh man, I want to buy $1 million. Man, I would buy more if only I could access some cash along the way, because I might have these 2 things coming up that prevent me from going an incremental mil. But when you know that you can now take a loan, you say, oh, I'm going to go into the full clip that I wanted, and I'm going to keep something here at Ledn to draw from this loan whenever I need to, right? And so the new guys are looking at this as a tool to hold for longer and with more conviction. The old guys are seeing it as a way of monetizing the wealth they've already built.
Final question for you, because we've gone a long time already. How do you think about managing the next cycle? Let's assume there's still cyclicality, as there is with all assets. You've gone through several learning periods, as we all do. How do you think about that now?
Great question. So for me, one thing that's true for Bitcoin is volatility, right? And every time you think it's gone, it just comes roaring back and it shows you that it's still here, right? So we are almost to a fault obsessive about working with our clients to expect and protect against a sudden move in price down, right? So even though the market's running high, even though everybody's at all-time highs and excited, we're going to people and saying, did you know about auto top-up? Did you know that you can use this feature to meet collateral calls if and when your loan needs it? Did you know that we don't punish you for over-collateralizing your loan if you want to have an extra buffer? And so what we have found is that over time, when we get these 30% drawdowns, like the Japanese yen unwind was the most recent one, I think it was August. Every time we see a 30% drawdown, we see a smaller percentage of our book get liquidated, and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller, and we see more people utilizing things like auto top up. We see more people proactively sending collateral on chain. We see more people sending more Bitcoin to the loan as the market starts rolling over. Such that when the market does happen, everybody can just bounce back and be happy, right? So education is a big part. One of the things that we are, like I mentioned, our clients are smart people. if I tell you where the goalposts are, you'll figure out how to score or not get scored on, right? So we're pretty obsessive about here's the goalposts. Make sure you're planning to score and not take any goals against you, right? That number one. Then education one, then tools, right? Auto top up we've had for now over a year. I am happy to report that 99.999% of the people that have used the feature have seen their loan protected. One person in this cohort left some dust on the transaction. So it worked, but it just moved over dust, and it just, the level just slid through butter. And he stops me for saying 100%. But I can tell you that everyone that's used this tool has benefited from it. And our team, if you go online and look at what our team is to do, if you ever need something at Ledn, we'll get back to you like this. And we'll assist you, whether you need to reset a password, whether you need to, change your 2FA for whatever reason to log into your account and be able to top up that loan. We're here 24/7.
Mauricio, super interesting. It was a great conversation, great story, and just really interesting to see a new business developing and like this. And you've gone through the whole ups and downs of it, the learnings, and building something that's very useful, because people have an enormous amount of wealth in this asset, and they need to be able to access some of that wealth in ways that if they were a billionaire and they had art, they can go to UBS and borrow against their art. If they've got gold, they can borrow against their gold. If they've got houses, they can borrow against their houses. Yes, this is a 70 vol asset, so you can't borrow as much money against it. But if you can borrow it in a safe way, it kind of makes sense.
And it's a 70 vol asset today. Because I think that as people and more people figure out that this will be the reserve asset of the world,
vol goes down. Yeah,
I see this trading a lot more with gold's vol. What's gold vol at? 20? I don't really know what gold vol is at.
But let's assume, of course, over time as you hit deeper adoption. All right, my friend, thank you so much, and let's see how the rest of the cycle plays out as well.
Always a pleasure. See you soon on the island.
See ya. Well, Mauricio's story is one hell of a story. But it's not just him. There's millions and millions, or tens or if not hundreds of millions of people trapped in similar regimes where they need to find a way out, to find a desperate solution. His story of selling anything at any bid just to get dollars is terrifying. But that happens all across the world. It's happened obviously in Zimbabwe, Venezuela. It's happened in Argentina. It's happened all across Africa. It's happened in so many countries. Everything is fine until it isn't. And Bitcoin and this parallel financial system gives us a way out. And once you've opted into that financial system, there are new services being built for that new crypto economy. And that gives us all a chance to secure our future. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time. Hey, thanks for sticking around to the end. Look, if you enjoyed it, hit the subscribe button and check out the video here on the right-hand side. I'm sure you'll enjoy that one as well. And if you're ready for more, go to realvision.com/join. I'll see you there.